Ryan Carter stood before the expansive glass window of his penthouse office, gazing down at the bustling streets of Seattle below. Skyscrapers gleamed in the fading twilight, and in the distance Puget Sound stretched out like a mirror reflecting the gray sky. At 38, he was an icon in the tech world. A self-made man who had built Synaptech, an AI software company worth millions from scratch. Forbes had once dubbed him the youngest self-made billionaire of the decade. But to Ryan, that was just a milestone, not the finish line. He checked his watch. 4:30 p.m., November 15, 2024. In an hour, he'd pilot his Cessna 172 to Portland for a meeting with investors. His latest project, an AI system capable of predicting user behavior with 95% accuracy, promised to elevate Synaptech to new heights. Ryan smirked, thinking, "This is when I change the world." Sarah, his assistant, knocked and entered. She was a petite woman in her early 30s, with neatly tied brown hair and sharp eyes. "Mr. Carter, the weather report says there's strong winds south of Seattle tonight. Are you sure you want to fly?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Ryan waved her off. "I've flown in worse. Don't worry, Sarah. Everything's under control." Confidence wasn't arrogance for him. It was a bedrock belief in his abilities. From a kid in Tacoma's slums, he'd learned to seize every chance and let nothing stand in his way. Sarah nodded, though her eyes betrayed unease. "I'll prep the meeting documents. Good luck." She left, leaving Ryan with visions of the triumph ahead. He slipped on his leather jacket, grabbed his plane keys and headed out, oblivious to the life-altering turn awaiting him. The small airfield on Seattle's outskirts was quiet in the late afternoon. Wind whipped through the pine trees, carrying the bite of early winter. Ryan inspected his Cessna 172 one last time. Its sleek body shone, and the engine roared steadily as he fired it up. He loved the freedom of flying, the sense of being king of the skies, unbound by earthly limits. He donned his pilot's headset and took off at 5:15 p.m. The sky darkened, thick clouds swirling like a brewing storm. Ryan keyed the radio. "This is November 375, departing Boeing Field, heading Portland. 8:06:30. A voice crackled back. "Copy November 375. Watch for gusts, report any issues." The plane soared over dense green forests, city lights fading behind him. Ryan checked the instruments. Everything was perfect. He rehearsed his pitch in his mind. "Our AI doesn't just predict, it shapes the future." Then, a faint pop came from the engine. He frowned, glancing at the oil pressure gauge. The needle was dropping. "What the hell?" he muttered, gripping the yoke tighter. He hit the radio. "Tower. This is November 375. I've got engine trouble." Static buzzed back, no signal. The plane shuddered, black smoke rising from the left wing. Ryan fought to stay calm, but his heart pounded like a drum. He lowered altitude, scanning for a clearing to emergency land, but fierce winds threw the plane off course. Then a loud crack, the propeller stopped dead. The Cessna plummeted like an arrow, spiraling through the air. Ryan yelled, not in fear but in fury. "No, not now." Darkness swallowed him whole. Ryan didn't know how long he'd been out. When he opened his eyes, there was no wreckage, no sirens, no pain. Instead, he stood in a space awash with light, not harsh like headlights but soft and warm, as if it flowed through every cell in his body. He looked at his hands, no cuts, no blood. His flight suit was intact, and he felt light, as if every burden of his earthly life had melted away. "Where am I?" he wondered aloud, his voice echoing in the boundless expanse. Then he saw him. A man standing a few steps away, simple yet commanding an irresistible presence. He wore a plain white shirt and jeans, but his eyes, deep and radiant, made Ryan feel small, as if all his achievements were mere grains of sand before an ocean. "Ryan," he said, his voice a resonant symphony in Ryan's soul. "We need to talk." "Who are you?" Ryan asked, though a guess flickered in his mind. The man smiled, gentle yet enigmatic. "I am Jesus," he replied. Ryan froze, his mind reeling. He wasn't religious. He'd been to church a handful of times as a kid, and to him, faith was for the weak, a crutch. But now Jesus's presence was too real, too overwhelming to deny. "I want to talk to you about fasting," Jesus continued. Ryan blinked. "Fasting? What do you mean?" I'm not here to lose weight. Jesus chuckled, a sound clear as wind chimes. No, Ryan. The fasting I mean isn't what you think. It's a doorway. A way to find yourself and to find me. Jesus waved his hand, and the space around Ryan shifted. Vivid images sprang up like a giant 4D screen. He saw a young woman posing before a mirror, snapping a selfie with the caption, "Day 5 fasting. Feeling amazing." She posted it on Instagram with #FastingChallenge. Hundreds of likes and comments flooded in, but Jesus shook his head. "This is the first mistake," he said. People turn fasting into a performance. They flaunt it on social media, dramatize their hunger, all to be noticed. When you fast for applause, you lose its true power. The only reward you get is a few likes, and then it's gone. Ryan nodded, a twinge of guilt surfacing. He recalled joining a detox trend once, posting about it on LinkedIn to show discipline. "I get it," he said. "But if it's not for show, then what's it for?" Jesus' gaze pierced him. The second mistake is even bigger. Fasting without clear intent. The images shifted. Ryan saw a middle-aged man at a restaurant, skipping steak because it's supposed to be healthy. He fasted for a day, then resumed normal eating, unchanged inside. Fasting without a spiritual purpose is a waste, Jesus said. It's not about starving. It's about opening yourself to something greater. A cool breeze brushed Ryan as Jesus spoke on. "So what is it?" Ryan asked, curiosity rising. Jesus smiled. "It's a spiritual technology. A way to tune your soul, to hear my voice, to live your true purpose." The space shifted again. Ryan found himself on a vast field, Jesus beside him. "Look," he said, and scenes unfolded like living films before Ryan's eyes. First was the absolute fast. He saw a man kneeling in a desert, lips cracked, eyes blazing with faith. He neither ate nor drank, pleading for his people's salvation. "This is the absolute fast," Jesus explained. "Rare and intense for the greatest crises." Next was the normal fast. Ryan saw Jesus himself in a wilderness, thin but radiant, drinking only from a small stream. 40 days, he said. "Not to prove anything to others, but to prepare for my mission." This is the most common, solids off, water on, to focus on what matters. The partial fast appeared with a man refusing meat and wine, eating only vegetables and water. "This is discipline," Jesus said. "Like Daniel in Babylon, choosing purity to stay true amid a foreign world." Ryan nodded. It felt like a stand he could take. Then the John Wesley fast. A man from the 18th century eating dry bread and water before preaching. "This is preparation," Jesus said. "Simple but powerful, sharpening your ears to my words." Finally, the rotation fast. A woman cutting out food groups weekly, noting each change. "This teaches discernment," he said. "What truly nourishes you?" Ryan stood silent, each story sinking in. "Each type has a purpose," Jesus said. "But the heart behind it matters most. Without that, it's just an empty shell." The ground beneath Ryan trembled faintly, as if he'd stepped into another dimension. Jesus' eyes glowed with the vibrancy of countless tales. "See those who came before you," he said, his voice echoing like waves on a shore. Before Ryan, a scene emerged. A man in a barren field leading thousands to kneel in silence. They ate nothing, drank nothing, only bowed in prayer. "This is Ezra," Jesus said. He guided 4,000 in a fast for protection as they left exile. Not for fame, but for their survival. Ryan felt the weight of that moment. Raw, unadorned, intense. The vision shifted. A young woman with fiery eyes stood in a lavish palace, calling her people to fast. Thousands joined her. "This is Esther," Jesus said. She fasted to save her nation from annihilation. It wasn't just personal. It built a spiritual shield for all. Ryan sensed an invisible force radiating from them, altering history's course. Then a solemn festival, thousands under a gray sky fasting, heads bowed in humility. "The Day of Atonement," Jesus said. They fasted to recall their need for mercy, to realign with me. Ryan saw fasting as more than individual. It tied people to each other and to something vast. "Fasting is never just about you," Jesus said, locking eyes with Ryan. "It's alignment with community, with my purpose, with a higher reality." Ryan nodded, his heart opening to these truths. He'd never imagined skipping a meal could hold such depth. Jesus guided Ryan into a new space. No historical scenes, but a strange sensation, like standing amid invisible frequencies. "Feel your body," he said. Ryan closed his eyes, marveling. He wasn't hungry or thirsty, yet he felt more alive than ever. "People think their bodies are mere machines," Jesus said, his tone gentle yet firm. "But it's a spiritual instrument. When you fast with intent, you tune it to hear frequencies you normally miss." Ryan frowned, grappling with the idea. "Like a radio?" Jesus nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Exactly. When you clear away distractions, food, busyness, noise, you make room to hear me clearly. Fasting isn't punishing your body. It's expanding your soul." A light breeze swirled around Ryan, as if his words were alive. He went on. "When you're hungry, each pang is a prayer. When you refuse the easy, you open to the profound." Ryan recalled scarfing burgers during Zoom calls, never pausing to think. He realized he'd lived so fast he'd forgotten stillness. "Fasting is a language," Jesus said, his voice deepening. "A communication beyond words, where you and I meet in utter truth." Ryan's heart raced, not from fear but excitement. Fasting wasn't just a ritual. It was a way to live more fully. Jesus waved again and vivid scenes returned. "Look deeper into each fast," he said. "They're not just methods, they're doors to me. First, the absolute fast." Ryan saw a man, Paul perhaps, kneeling in darkness after a blinding light on Damascus Road. "No food, no water for 3 days. This is total surrender," Jesus said. "When you give up everything, you trust me completely. It's rare, demanding great courage." Next, the normal fast. Jesus in the wilderness, gaunt yet powerful. 40 days, he said. "Not for others but for my mission's prep. This is the most common, solids off, liquids on to center you." Ryan felt the strength in its silence. The partial fast. Daniel refusing royal feasts for vegetables and water. "This is resolve," Jesus said. Daniel chose it not for health, but faith amid pressure. Ryan thought of Seattle's temptations and wondered if he could stand firm. The John Wesley fast. An 18th century man with bread and water before preaching. "Wesley used this to prepare," Jesus said. "Simple, yet it sharpens your spirit." Finally, the rotation fast, a woman phasing out foods, tracking effects. "This teaches clarity," he said. "What feeds, what weighs you down?" Ryan stood still, each tale etching into him. "Each is a path," Jesus said. "But without your heart aimed at me, it's hollow." The space shifted again. 2 contrasting scenes appeared. On the left, a young girl knelt in an African village, fasting 3 days for rain. Her face was gaunt, but her eyes burned with faith. Ryan felt the air around her shift, as if her prayers moved nature. On the right, a middle-aged man in a grand church, suited up, boomed, "I fasted a week to get closer to God." Cameras rolled, the crowd clapped. But Ryan sensed an emptiness, no energy, no life. Jesus looked at him, eyes sad yet kind. "Intent is everything," he said. He quoted words Ryan vaguely recalled from childhood. "When you fast, don't look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they seek others' praise. Truly, they've had their reward." It clicked. The man fasted for acclaim, and that's all he got. The girl fasted for more, and it unleashed real power. "Fasting isn't refusing food," Jesus said. "It's a strategy to carve sacred space, to align your will with mine." A surge of light coursed through Ryan. Fasting wasn't just action. It was a deep conversation between him and something beyond. Jesus stepped closer, and Ryan felt warmth from him like an unseen flame. "Hear these principles," he said. "They'll guide you. First, spiritual alignment," he began. "Fasting opens a link to me. By letting go of the physical, you hunger for the eternal." Ryan pictured skipping lunch at Synaptech to reflect, wondering if he'd feel it. Second, intentional space. Jesus continued. "Your world's loud, meetings, phones, deadlines. Fasting carves quiet to hear me." Ryan recalled days plugged into headphones for hours, never pausing. Third, discipline of release, he said. "Each hunger pang is a chance to let go of self, to choose the eternal over the fleeting." Ryan thought of eating from boredom, feeling a pang of shame. Finally, communal strength, Jesus concluded. Fasting together doesn't just add power, it multiplies it. Ryan imagined his Synaptech team fasting for a new vision, the idea thrilling him. It's not a diet, Jesus said, a hint of humor in his tone. It's a way to rewire your whole being. Ryan smiled, feeling handed a blueprint, not for a company but for himself. Ryan stood silent, the light flickering like tiny stars around him. Jesus approached, his gaze both gentle and firm, a teacher arming a student. You've seen fasting's meaning, he said. But knowing isn't enough. You must live it. Ryan nodded, eager yet anxious. But how do I start? My life's too busy, meetings, deadlines, flights. Fasting feels impractical. He gave a nervous laugh, half justifying himself. Jesus smiled knowingly. You don't need to do it all at once, Ryan. Start small. He gestured as if painting the air. Skip one meal. Maybe the lunch you scarf down in your car. Use that time to be still, to talk to me. It doesn't have to be a marathon. Ryan pictured himself at Synaptech, leaving his desk bare instead of ordering a sandwich, sipping water instead. It felt odd yet promising. Then what? He asked. Stay consistent, Jesus said. Like building your company step by step. But keep it quiet. No posts, no fanfare. This isn't a trophy. It's a journey between you and me. Ryan recalled LinkedIn brags, feeling sheepish. And most importantly, Jesus added, do it with a true heart. Fasting isn't a test of endurance. It's seeking something deeper. Clarity for work. Peace in chaos. His words washed over Ryan like a cool breeze, calming his cluttered mind. Jesus peered into Ryan's eyes, as if reading his every thought. But you'll face struggles, he said, his tone growing serious. Your world teaches that hunger's the enemy, that every need must be met instantly. Fasting will defy all you've learned. The space morphed. Ryan saw images, not of himself but others mirroring battles he'd face. A man sat before a feast, hands trembling as he refused bread. Hunger will come, Jesus said. Your body will protest, your mind will bargain. Just one bite, what's the harm? That's when you learn to push through. Ryan saw a woman in a store staring at snacks, then turning away with regret. You're taught satisfaction is happiness, Jesus said. Fasting shows happiness is freedom. Freedom from what controls you. Ryan recalled late-night stress eating, realizing he'd never been free. It's not punishment, Jesus stressed. It's space-making. Refusing the easy opens you to the eternal. Ryan felt a phantom hunger, but instead of dread, he saw it as an invitation to explore something new. Jesus raised his hand and energy surged through Ryan. Listen to your body, he said. It's not just flesh. It's part of your spiritual self. Ryan closed his eyes, feeling his heartbeat, his breath, as if noticing them for the first time. When you fast, Jesus explained, you don't just skip food. You heighten spiritual awareness. Hunger wakes you, sharpens your senses, opens your soul to hear me. Ryan pictured himself as an old radio, static filled from life's noise, fasting the knob to find a clear signal. Your body's a violin, he said. Play it right and it makes beautiful music. Fasting teaches you my song. Ryan smiled, thinking of neglecting his body, late nights, junk food, a machine, not a tool. Could he make it sing? But it's not easy, Jesus warned. You'll feel weak before strong. That's the journey. Ryan nodded, gaining respect for his body, not to dominate but to hear. Jesus stepped closer, the light warming like an invisible embrace. Now look at yourself, he said. Fasting will challenge you most, Ryan. Ryan frowned, unsure. You've built your life on control, Jesus said, gentle yet cutting. Your company, your flights, your plans, all proofs you hold the reins. Fasting asks you to let go. Ryan's chest tightened. He was right, Ryan thrived on believing hard work could shape anything. You find worth in success, Jesus continued. $1 million deals, headlines, that's you. But fasting teaches your worth isn't what you do, but who you are when you stop. Pride, shame, and fear crashed over Ryan. He recalled coding through nights, refusing rest to stay ahead. It'll be hard for you, Jesus said. It asks you to pause when everything screams to run. Ryan nodded, his words a mirror to his hidden corners. But that's its power, Jesus finished. True strength isn't doing, It's knowing when to stop. Ryan inhaled deeply, handed a test he'd never prepared for. Jesus raised his hand, the space quieting like a cozy room in a storm. I'll give you steps, he said. Not for perfection, but to begin. First, start small, he said. Don't jump to a week-long fast. Skip one meal, maybe the coffee rush breakfast. Sit still, think. Ryan pictured his Seattle apartment, forgoing coffee to watch rain fall. Second, have a clear purpose, Jesus went on. Fasting without aim is like flying blind, you'll drift. What do you seek? Creativity for your project? Peace under pressure? Pick one. Ryan thought of his AI, wondering if fasting could spark a breakthrough. Third, find a companion, he said. Not to boast, but to steady you. Someone you trust who gets this path. Sarah came to mind, discreet, a listener unlikely to scoff. Fourth, replace physical hunger with spiritual, Jesus said. Instead of eating, read, pray, write. Don't leave the void empty. Ryan saw himself with a notebook, not a phone, capturing stray thoughts. Finally, be gentle, he concluded. It's not a race. If you falter, rise and try again. Just start. Ryan smiled. The steps felt close, doable, like a business plan he could execute. Ryan stood still, his breath mingling with the space's wondrous calm. Jesus looked at him, his eyes a beacon through Ryan's mental fog. Fasting isn't just a lesson, Ryan, he said, his voice a soothing melody. It's a dialogue between human limits and my boundless possibility. The space shifted, new images emerging. A businessman, not Ryan, sat in a sleek office, skipping lunch to jot creative ideas. He fasted monthly, and Ryan saw his thoughts grow sharper, deeper. Fasting gave him clarity, Jesus explained. Not from hunger, but the space it made for me to speak. Then an artist, hands paint-streaked, forgoing dinner to sit at her easel. She fasted and her canvases came alive, her soul spilling into each stroke. She found inspiration, Jesus said. Not in food, but in fasting stillness. A spark flared in Ryan. Can I do that? He asked. Find creativity, purpose? Jesus nodded. Fasting is a wordless language, he said. Each refusal of the easy is a question to me. Listen and I'll answer. Ryan pictured himself at Synaptech, skipping lunch for a notebook, ideas flowing like a spring. Fasting wasn't just a challenge. It was a door to something greater than his million-dollar deals. Jesus led Ryan to a new space. A tranquil forest, tall trees filtering sunlight through leaves. Feel the stillness, he said. Ryan breathed deeply, realizing it was his first time in years without phone buzzes, keyboard clacks, or city hum. Your world says busyness is power, Jesus said, his voice soft yet compelling. Fasting says true power is stillness. Ryan saw a group in a small room, silent, fasting, listening. An unseen energy pulsed from them. Not action's noise, but presence's might. When you fast, Jesus continued, you shed distractions. You carve a void, and in it you'll find me. Ryan recalled racing between meetings, eating on the fly to keep going. He'd never stopped, not unwillingly, but afraid stopping meant losing everything. What if I fail? Ryan asked, doubt creeping in. If I can't fast long or give up? Jesus smiled. Failure isn't the end, Ryan. It's part of the path. Each try teaches, each rise strengthens. Relief washed over Ryan. Fasting wasn't a contest to win. It was a road to explore, step by step, in a stillness he'd never known. The light around Ryan dimmed, as if a curtain slowly fell. A gentle, irresistible pull tugged him, like his body was being drawn elsewhere. Jesus looked at him, eyes full of love and urging. Your time here is nearly done, he said. But what you've learned stays forever. Panic gripped Ryan. But I'm not ready, he blurted. There's so much I want to ask, to grasp. He felt like a child yanked from a beloved book before the last page. Jesus laid a hand on his shoulder, and deep peace flowed through him. You don't need to grasp it all now, he said. Fasting is a journey, not a finish line. Take what I've given into your life, and you'll see me in every step. Ryan nodded, heart heavy with parting. As the light faded, Jesus whispered, fasting is a heart's journey, not a stage act. Remember that, Ryan. His voice echoed in Ryan's mind, then darkness took over. His body grew heavy, falling through an endless tunnel. A sharp beep sounded and voices, not Jesus's, reached him. Ryan opened his eyes, harsh white hospital lights hitting him like a blow. He heard the steady beep of a heart monitor, doctor's murmurs, and smelled sharp antiseptic. He lay in bed, aching but alive, something he couldn't believe. A doctor, middle-aged with salt and pepper hair, leaned over. "Mr. Carter, you're a miracle," he said, awed. "You were clinically dead for 10 minutes after the crash. We didn't think you'd wake." Ryan tried sitting up, but chest pain forced him back. 10 minutes, he rasped. He recalled every second in that light. Talking with Jesus, fasting's lessons, absolute peace. Not a dream, not a hallucination, too real, too vivid for anything but truth. Sarah entered, eyes red but bright with joy. "Mr. Carter, I thought we'd lost you," she choked out. Ryan gave a weak smile. "I went far, Sarah. But I'm back." He didn't mention Jesus. Not unwillingly, but it wasn't time. Days later, he stayed hospitalized, body mending, mind replaying his experience. He couldn't return to his old life, racing without pause. Jesus's words echoed. Fasting is a heart's journey. He'd try not to prove anything but to seek something deeper. 2 months post-crash, Ryan stood in his downtown Seattle apartment, watching rain fall through the wide window. He'd left the hospital nearly healed, but he wasn't the old Ryan Carter. Synaptech thrived, but he delegated more. He no longer dove into work like a machine. He sought balance, something he'd never thought he needed. It was a Tuesday, and Ryan chose to fast for the first time. He skipped breakfast. No coffee, no toast, just water. He sat in an armchair, notebook in hand, and wrote, "I want clarity for my AI project. I want to hear something bigger." No posts, no telling anyone, not even Sarah, just him and what he sought. Hunger hit by 10 a.m. A hollow ache making him restless. He considered grabbing a granola bar, but stopped. Jesus's words returned. Each hunger is a prayer. He sat still, letting it remind him he awaited. Not food, but an answer. By noon he felt different, not hungrier but sharper. Ideas sparked, not just for AI but how to live. He wrote them down, words flowing like an unexpected stream. At day's end he ate lightly, bread and fruit, not from need but gratitude. Ryan gazed out, rain steady. He wasn't the man controlling everything anymore. He was learning to pause, listen, live with greater purpose. He thought of you reading this and wanted to say, try it. Start small. Set an intent, make space to hear. Your path awaits. He smiled, knowing this wasn't an end but a beginning. A journey not just changing him but perhaps the world, one step at a time.